Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting...
Kaboom! We're talking about the Manhattan Project today for its 40th anniversary. Now, this is kind of a hidden gem of a movie. It didn't make a big splash on initial release, but I'm very glad I got the chance to watch this because it kind of fits right in with other kind of 80s teenage weird science kind of classics. And so I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about this movie. And to help me do it, we have our, we've called him in the past a semi-professional podcast guest, but he's now become our unofficial nuclear holocaust correspondent, having been on previous episodes on the Fallout video game franchise and war games. So please welcome back to the podcast, BT Moore. Hey, BT.
Hey, how's it going, Doug? Great to be here. Super excited to do this movie. Yes, I'm the unofficial nuclear weapons expert of the podcast. And I understand you've never seen this movie before. Is that correct?
This is my first time watching it. I didn't even know it existed until you mentioned it as a possible subject when we were chatting about, hey, if you want to come back on the show, what would you bring? And you came up with this. Did you come up with this specifically to keep our end of the world discussion going, or just because this was a movie you...
Well, I thought this would be a good follow-up because we did War Games, which has a similar structure of we've got a kind of, whiz kid here, and in War Games he hacks into the computer that controls the nuclear weapons, and in this movie it's this kid genius that decides to make a nuclear weapon. So it seemed like a perfect follow-up, and it totally has a lot of Stranger Things vibes. I mean, we've got a small, sleepy, beautiful town with a secret government laboratory where all sorts of, not all sorts of things are going crazy, but they've got some green glowing goop in there that checks out with our a lot of 80s movies have this kind of going on. So I think it really kind of works in well with your podcast and what you follow in kind of 80s and nerds and sci-fi and everything. So we got a lot of nerds in this movie, and it's another, great kind of it. Even though it's an unknown movie, I think I saw it on cable many times, and it's a great cable movie because you turn it on and you can pick up on what's going on pretty much immediately. Like, kids got a bomb, okay, great, I'm off and running.
Yeah, if you ask the Duffer Brothers, have they seen this? I would imagine the answer is yes. They're obviously very steeped in the films of this era. I don't know how this one passed me by. I just never got around to it. But it has so much in common with all of those things you just rattled off, right? It has that kind of 80s thing that kids rule. Just, the kids can do it, whatever it is. They're going to, create a problem, but then solve the problem. And so you've got all of that. It's got
right, and the kids can outsmart the adults, right?
Usually, yeah, the kids outsmart the adults. That's slightly horny, but not too much. There's some good stuff in here. You've got some good 80s cast members who we'll talk about in a bit. So tell me about your nostalgic memories, though. So when did you first see it, and how was this the thing that you were like, oh man, I got to talk about the Manhattan Project? Where did this come in for you?
So I remember, me personally, I was a big science geek in high school, and this movie came out when I was like 10. But as I, would run into it in, Sunday afternoon, cable or whatever, it struck a chord because here's a kid, he's winning, and I won every science fair, Doug, that I ever entered in high
Of
school.
course. Yeah, me too.
This is the ultimate, like, if you can build a nuclear bomb in high school, you're pretty much winning the science fair. And that's on the surface what the movie's about.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, he's so like adorably naive in some parts. Like he's incredibly smart, but also he's still a teenager and stupid. Where he's like,
right,
"I'm gonna win the science fair." It's like, does no part of you worry about what you've created? Did you not read the quote from Mr. Oppenheimer when he made the
right.
bomb? Like the fact that like this ends has as happy an ending as it does is pretty amazing. But you're absolutely right. Like it has all of that kind of can do fun spirit in it. There's a heist basically in the middle of this movie. So if you like a heist movie, you're going to get some of that. So yeah, there's a lot to like here. Um, it was directed and written by Marshall Brickman, who famously was Woody Allen's collaborator on Annie Hall. So
Right.
there's a screenplay you want to have under your belt.
And I think he also he worked on a movie that was just called Manhattan.
Yes, yeah,
I think.
Woody Allen, another Woody Allen movie called Manhattan. Which say what you want
Right,
about Woody Allen, the man does know how to write. He
right.
may have some poor judgment in other areas, but he is good at his job.
Yeah, Marshall Brickman, he produced a few other movies, I think, but this is the only movie that he directed. And in my opinion, the directing in this movie is really great. The premise is a very bonkers kind of premise if you think, I mean, if you think about it for too long. But the movie is very efficient. It moves along pretty quick, and it has a great, I love a montage. A lot of people don't love a montage, but it's got a great montage in there to because how else are you gonna, build a nuclear bomb without a montage? It takes a while. So yeah, and the form of the movie and how everything is set and how they really like negotiate the tone of the movie because this is a could be a pretty dark dark movie. And then we have a lot of like we have some heist and some hijinks and even though I think it's like one of the best bomb diffusing scenes in all of cinema, it's got some really funny lines during that scene.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. Like this is a victory of tone, and I think that this really tonally is of a piece with War Games. Like it's like this movie is such a shadow of that movie in a lot of ways. The general structure of it is roughly the same. The protagonist is fairly similar, although Paul here is a lot more of kind of an ass than
Right. Not quite as likable as Broderick.
yeah, I think that's also very interesting in that like you have a protagonist here. So the main character is this teenager named Paul Stevens, who's played by an actor Christopher Collett, who didn't do a whole lot in terms
Right.
of acting, but he's great here, and he's kind of he's arrogant. I mean, in a way that you would expect, like someone who is this much of a phenom to be able to figure out how to make a nuclear bomb, and then not only make the nuclear bomb, he has to pull off the heist to get the plutonium to make the bomb. Like there's so many aspects of this where like he really is the smartest guy in the room, and that's reflected in his personality.
Right. And we do see this relationship between him and John Lithgow, who John, he sort of picks up on like, oh, this kid's actually kind of bright. Although, John Lithgow's, the scientist character definitely underestimates how smart Paul is. But there is a kind of kindred spirit there and this weird kind of bonding in the end of the movie as when we get to the climax and the resolution. Um,
It's really deft in that you basically, yeah, he's not quite a deuteragonist, but I mean he's almost your second protagonist in John Lithgow, and they're both kind of unlikable at the start.
right.
The movie's giving you reasons to dislike both of them, but by the end of it, like uh, you come to like both of them. But it is very tricky to have both of them be in this position where you're kind of like, I don't know how to feel about this person. Do I want them to succeed? Like, what's wrong with them? But yeah, watching them kind of come together is the one of the like magic tricks this movie's able to pull.
Well, I want to mention a few things, and then let's go in and like break down the plot points in the movie. There's some just amazing, as we alluded to, amazing casting in this movie, and there's a million of character actors that went. I think this was had to be their first or second movie that went on to huge careers. Of course, we got John Lithgow. We have Cynthia Nixon, who's 20 years old in this movie, playing a high schooler. Uh, and is up there in my pantheon of coolest high school girlfriends in cinema. And we have John Mahoney shows up, aka Frasier's dad.
I put him as Frasier's dad in my notes. It made it easier.
Frasier's dad. I mean, that's what he's most known for. We have Sean Leonard Scott,
Robert Sean Leonard. You mean?
And from Dead Poets Society, and this is his second movie. And he's super young in this movie. And then we also have this guy named Tim Carhart, who I know as the guy in Hunt for Red October that says, "Hey, I think they're shooting at us." And one of the guys in the mini sub. And there's another. I forgot to write his name down, but he's a very famous voice actor. He's one of the scientists, and he's in a movie that I love. It's called In a World, where he plays a famous voiceover character, but his IMDb just goes on forever because he does regular acting and voice acting.
Interesting. I didn't catch
so those
it.
are all little great people that you run into during this movie, and there's probably a few others. I mean, depending on what movies you've seen.
Well, the other person I wanted to spotlight is Jill Eikenberry, who plays Paul's mom, who maybe
Right.
audiences aren't as familiar with now, but she was a main cast member of L.A. Law, one of the biggest TV shows in history.
Right.
And I went back and I watched L.A. Law. I think I was way after its heyday. I want to say it was like in the early 2000s. But it was before I went to law school, and I did watch a lot of it, and was one of the things that kind of made me go like, okay, like I liked law shows like that. Now I can't watch shows like that because it's like I'm not bringing work home with me. This isn't
Right.
entertaining at all. But she's excellent on that show. She's done a few other things, but that would be by far what she's most known for. But here she is, playing Paul's mom. So
Yep.
yeah, solid cast of like really well chosen people.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk about this. Let's break this movie down because I think, for probably a lot of our audience, they may never even heard of this. So this will be kind of an interesting experience. I would say go watch it first. Don't just, experience the movie through the podcast. But here we go. So we open up on this experiment taking place in a lab that is overseen by John Lithgow. And it's not exactly clear what's happening. We don't really need to know. But the bottom line is it ultimately produces this bright green glowing ectoplasmic goop that we're told is 99.97% pure plutonium, which leads to, toasting and the military brass talking about how great this is. And the plan is we need to set him up somewhere and keep an eye on him.
Yeah, it's the purest plutonium ever created, similar to the blue meth in Breaking Bad. And so they're gonna set him up with his own lab. And there's a line in there. It's like, oh, you could publish. And then the government people look kind of uncomfortable. And he's like, oh, I meant he could. He's not going to, obviously, because that would, can't. This is all top secret stuff.
Yeah, we can tell this is insanely top secret. What this is in a way that I think comes back in a really interesting way in some of the dialogue later. When the military brass kind of pushes back on John. His character's name is also John. John Mathewson is the scientist here. And so we go to Ithaca, New York. And we see all of these like big semis moving through. So what we'll later come to understand is whatever this lab or whatever equipment they want to set John Lithgow up with, that's where it's going to be in upstate New York.
Yeah, we got this little opening montage of like, unmarked trucks driving through the back roads at night, classic government spooky activity, drives it into, a warehouse, no windows, and the door closes, and, that the lab is off and running.
Right. And in the middle of all of this, these trucks driving at night, we see Paul for the first time. He wakes up in his room, and it's like, I love the set dressing in this room. It tells you everything you need to know about him. It's the nerd movie posters, the like Scientific American type magazines, the like half completed science experiments and stuff in the room, the old
Right.
Apple II computer, like everything tells you this is a whiz kid of 1986.
Right.
And
And
then
we have a little,
yeah.
scene with the mom and the kid, he's waking up at like 4 in the morning, and there's a little line about, oh, I just don't sleep anymore, which, I mean, that's the sort of myth about geniuses is like they only need 4 hours of sleep. And the mom is up smoking cigarettes because dad left, and it's an, empty home. And it is a really kind of weird scene. And in a lot of ways, I think I mean, you can probably, for skip the first 15 minutes of this movie. But it is still like, it's part of the setup and
I
introducing the
think it,
characters, right?
yeah,
And a
it's
little,
good.
a little.
It's good character setup work, right? We got to meet Paul, we got to meet his mom, and we get their dynamic, right? Like they kind of support each other, but they're broken people a little bit. Him because he's, his
Right, yeah.
genius makes him an outsider. Mom because she's struggling with dad having, as we'll find out, dad up and runned off, and he's
Right.
gone. And so yeah, like her, like, hey, let's drink Ovaltine or whatever at 4 a.m. Like this is not a
That's
normal person's routine.
right, yeah.
But yeah, they have each other. So we get the trucks. They drive into this building called Metatomics. That's the front or whatever for this lab is.
Right.
And we got to
Nuclear
science
medicine.
class. Yeah. So we got to science class, and this Paul makes this blue liquid that he says is very unstable with respect to shock, and he puts it in this other kid's drawer. This kid named Roland,
Right.
and Roland is a dick, and he kind of has this coming.
Right.
What is that?
Nitrogen triiodide.
What's it do?
Unstable with respect to shock.
What's that mean?
Once it dries, if you touch it, it explodes.
Paul, you're crazy.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Whose drawer? Roland's.
Poor Roland.
Nah, he'll love it. Builds character.
He's coming.
Hiyo, Roland. Listen, could I borrow your English notes?
You've got to be kidding.
But I lent you my math homework at least 10 times.
Sorry, Stevens. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. I gotta look out for number one.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Last time we learned that plutonium is perfectly suited for the release of enormous amounts of energy due to its ability to fission under the action of slow neutrons. Now here we have the isotope plutonium-239. And here we have two very interesting inventions based on this. Now, can anyone tell us the principle behind the implosion device? Paul, could you enlighten us?
Huh?
Yes, Roland.
Yes. Your implosion design simply uses a chemical high explosive to squeeze a subcritical piece of weapons-grade plutonium-239 until it's supercritical, thereby producing an atomic explosion.
Thank you, Roland.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkie.
Right. And yeah, this is the interesting thing about this movie is that normally in I would say most people's experience, the smartest, kid in school is the nerdiest and is usually like bullied. And we've set it up here that like Paul's so smart, he's actually like he's a cool nerd. And he's sort of getting, revenge at someone who has, been mean to him. But it's a scene that I don't think has aged very well because in these days, if you're making stuff that explodes in the classroom, you're probably getting expelled. Was that your take?
Yeah, he's definitely like they don't explicitly say he's like on his he's got 2 strikes against him or whatever, but he seems to get away with a lot because of how smart he is. He's cool enough. Like he's he's not quite the nerdiest kid in class, even though he's the smartest kid. He's somewhere in between. He's half Bart Simpson, half Milhouse, I guess. Or something. Right. And so the teacher comes in to start talking about plutonium-239 and asks about this implosion principle, different methods essentially for catalyzing the nuclear reaction at the heart of a bomb. And Roland ends up explaining it because it's not that Paul didn't know, but he was distracted. He's checked out.
Right.
But Roland explains it, at which point he accidentally sets off this reaction that Paul set up for him. And there's this huge boom. So we just get a good
it strikes me that
he's a class clown sort of.
Yeah, there was another there was a very, very popular TV show, I think, that debuted the same year this movie came out, called MacGyver. And I think, one way or another, Paul and MacGyver have a lot of similar stuff going on.
Oh, definitely. Like, he's incredibly knowledgeable and resourceful. In a way, I mean, we're going to see a little of that right now, because in the next scene, his semi-girlfriend, it's not clear what they are at this point in the movie, but we meet Jen, that's Cynthia Nixon.
Right.
And she's lost her car keys, and Paul says, "Hey, do you got a nail file?" Which she does, and it turns out you can use a nail file to open any lock in this movie.
Exactly.
And so, which he does for her, and then she asks him for a study date, and he asks, "Well, what about this guy Eric that you're dating?" And she says, "Nah, he's just pretty." And there's a joke there about babysitting, and then, does he bite? No, I do.
Right. She's hot for his brains, basically.
Not just his brains.
There's another. I mean, there's a lot of subtle things subtle or not so subtle about Paul being smart and resourceful or almost heroic, and he's talking to her, and somebody throws a frisbee to Paul. He's not even looking at the guy throwing the frisbee, and he turns around, mid frisbee flight, and just catches it easily while he's talking to his new girlfriend. So this, he's physically coordinated. He's cool under pressure. We've really give you a lot of subtext in here, which is it's a really efficient directing in here of how we're going to build this character. So I like all that.
He's good at everything, right?
Yeah.
They just let you know, he's a whiz kid, but not just in one way. He can, like I said, he catches this frisbee out of the air like it was nothing. He's an X-Man almost. Yeah. Well, so we find out what Paul's mom does for a living. Paul's mom basically, she's not a realtor, but she helps people find apartments to rent and that kind of thing. Right. She's kind of a broker in that way, because John Lithgow comes in to ask her for her assistance in finding him a new place to live. And he is not picky. He needs 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. That's all he needs. He agrees to rent this place from her, sight unseen, doesn't care, and immediately starts to flirt with her, fairly aggressively.
Right. Yeah, he's immediately smitten for her, and of course is trying to get a date because he just moved in town. Why not? She's an attractive lady, and so that's we set this thing of well, we've got this out of town scientist hitting trying to get a relationship with Paul's mom, and I think this is kind of funny. It's this Paul doesn't necessarily like this, and I think this is part of the motivation of Paul wanting to break into the lab and getting pissed off, even though he says, "Hey, I don't like the fact that the government has set up this secret lab without telling us." He says a few other things. It's no, I think he's really mad that this guy's trying to date his mom.
Oh, this is 1,000% about Oedipus. This, he says that kind of stuff where it's oh, this government stuff. He doesn't care about politics. He doesn't care about any of that shit. It's very clear, that's what it is. Because Paul comes in, and he meets John Lithgow, and I'm sorry, I take that back. Paul doesn't come in yet. Oh, yes, he does. He comes in. Mom introduces him and explains, he's a science buff. And John Lithgow kind of goes, oh, okay. You want to see a cool laser? Why don't you come see my awesome lab? In a way that's like, he must be incredibly horny for Jill Eikenberry, because like the idea of like inviting someone into the brand new top secret plutonium laboratory, like I don't think they take a lot of visitors.
Right. Well, and this is part of him. It's some kid. What does it matter? We've got a front. I won't show him like the nuclear stuff, and he won't know what he's looking at anyway. So, yeah. I mean, it's somewhat plausible, but yeah, not very advisable.
Yeah, it's amazing this happens at all, because I mean, again, the script is very efficient. Like the very next scene is Paul bikes up to Metatomics, and the guard gets him in. He's told he's got to wear a name tag, and he walks down the halls and he asks about the series of like motion detectors that are on it, and he's taken into the laser lab, which kind of looks like the scene of the laser from Tron. It's this big, large like structure. It's not just any old laser. Like it's this huge thing. You can't tell what everything is and what it does, but there's pipes and scaffolding and gauges, and this looks like serious shit.
Well, I think the set design in the laboratory lends a lot of weight to the movie, because it does look very realistic, and because there's no real special effects in the movie, I think they got a lot of production value out of being able to like, oh, we're going to do like a really good laboratory here, because there's no explosion, spoiler, and no like special effects, and otherwise they're just in Ithaca and New York. So yeah, as like the production value of the movie, I think was well allocated, and really gives you the right vibe and the right realism that you need for this movie, because it is the most implausible movie ever made.
Well, I think wisely the design of this lab it's not slick in the slightest, right? There's nothing about it that's cool in the sense of like, oh, this is sci-fi awesomeness, and it's incredibly industrial looking. Yeah. It feels very real to what this stuff might look like, because of that. The one thing that's notable is there's this like robotic armature inside this plastic enclosure, and it's taking these like transparent containers of the green goo and slotting them into various
move them
numbered
around.
spaces for them,
testing them, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep. So the one thing your eye might be drawn to in this setup. So he finds Mathewson, and he shows him this laser that's powerful enough to blast a hole through what looks like to be a square of lead. And he asked Paul, like, what did your dad do? And he said, oh, he taught architecture at Cornell. And he asks Paul asks, what's this green stuff? And John Lithgow lies about what it really is. And he says, hey, are you going to date my mom? And he says, well, that's up to her. And while this is happening, as they're walking along the grounds, Paul plucks a clover in a way that is oddly conspicuous. So we cut from here to the date, and like they're asking Paul. So it's John Lithgow, Jill Eikenberry, and Paul there. And they ask like, hey, do you drink wine? And he says, no, it impairs my judgment. He's a teenager. Why are you offering wine to a teenager?
Yeah, exactly. And he sort of like uses that as a like, he's implying that, somebody's judgment at this table is impaired other than mine. And I believe like doesn't Lithgow's character give him this little puzzle, and he said, oh, one of my colleagues worked on this, and anyone that solves it in under 2 minutes is a genius. But Paul has already solved it before he finishes the sentence. And so yeah, we were like, oh, okay, yeah, Paul's real smart guy again.
Oh, wait. I didn't give you your present.
Present?
Yeah, it's a brain teaser. You have to get each of the 4 balls in the corners. A colleague of mine from MIT invented it. He's a games theorist, wants to market it. He says anyone who can do it inside of 2 minutes. I guess I'm going to have to come up with something harder.
Yeah, what the puzzle is, it's a a plastic box, and it's got 4 balls in it. And the goal is to get all 4 balls into the corners, which the average person would pick up, and they try and roll the balls around, which, as soon as you get one in there, the other ones roll out. But Paul solves it instantly by using centrifugal force. He just spins the box and all 4 balls fly out to the corners. But before he gets the present, Paul excuses himself to go try the nail file trick on John's car.
Right.
And he goes in the glove box and he takes a bunch of his IDs. He sees he's like employed by the Department of Energy. He gets a whole, bushel of information out of this glove box that he's going to use in a second, because he goes over to Jen's house to tell her what's going on. And he has already figured out everything not just what they're doing, but what his next move is. He's already got all planned out by now.
Well, yeah, this is the crazy part of the movie, because it seems like their first study date, and during this date they plan and execute this elaborate heist, right? Based on Paul says, well, they figure all the IDs are from famous nuclear labs. There's Alamogordo, where they developed the atomic bomb. There's Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee, where they, first, in whatever made the nuclear material, refined the nuclear material, and a few others. So, that is the craziest part of the movie. If like they're on a first date, and then we're right. We're gonna break into the lab and steal the stuff. And her motivation, well, they show her smoking, that establishes her. She's like a risk taker, and she wants to be a journalist. So she's like, oh, this could be my breakthrough story, to get my journalism career started. So that's her information. And of course, we mentioned like his motivation is like twofold. It's the Oedipus thing, and he just doesn't like being lied to by the government and all that.
This is really like ultimate, like, I'm going to do this because I can. That's usually his motivation for everything. It's like, yeah, he wants to get laid with Jen. He wants to do something cool. He's a thrill seeker. There's all of that stuff, right? He's got all this type A shit going on. I think, John Lithgow is a weird character to root for, because he's kind of awkward. And again, he's pretty aggressive in hitting on Paul's mom. Paul's awkward to root for in a way at first, because again, this stuff is incredibly arrogant, and like, it's cool that he's very smart, but it's dangerous. And like his recklessness is deeply concerning. But he shows off to first. He shows her like, look, I found this 5-leaf clover on the grounds. Like, what do you think the odds of that are? And she says, I don't know. She's skeptical. And then he pulls out, a handful of them. They're all 5-leaf clovers.
Right.
Where'd you find it?
Growing outside that lab. The odds on that kind of mutation happening naturally without chemicals or radiation or something? It's like 1,000,000,000 to 1. It never happens.
Maybe you're just very lucky. Who knows about this?
Just us.
We should do something.
We can get in there.
Well, he says the odds of this one clover is 1,000,000,000 to 1, and she's like, it could happen. And then he pulls out a pocket of them, and it's like, this can't happen without radiation. So that's another like proof or clue that like something is not right here at this laboratory.
Oh, every one of the main characters of this movie died of cancer eventually. Like, there's no question.
Oh, for sure.
They're all just hanging
and
around.
all the high school students.
Everybody, yeah. The amount of radiation.
Bomb, he at least has a fume hood and is venting this stuff somewhere, but where is it going? It's being blown over the school.
Right. So yeah, it's incredibly, he's worked out this entire heist from having spent all of 10 minutes in this laboratory earlier that same day. But what he figures out is there's a storm coming, and the electrical interference from the storm will assist them in ways that will become clear throughout this next leg of the movie, which is the heist. So they meet Jen's parents for a second. They're watching The Day the Earth Stood Still. Again, interesting sci-fi movie that I think we may, as a preview, we may be talking about when we get together for our next podcast, you and I. But she kisses Paul here, so she's like all in. She's just as reckless as he is in a way. But Jen's parents come home and they say, she says, I'm going to go drive Paul home. And so what they do is she drives up to Metatomics with Paul in the trunk, and he puts a leak into her tire. So she has this cover for pretending she has car trouble, and she's going to use that in the middle of this storm to distract the few guards that are there this late at night into helping her, while Paul sneaks out of the trunk and into the lab using the ID he stole.
Yeah, exactly. And right, yeah. So he uses the ID he stole. He breaks into the lab. He finds the green goo on the wall. He knows exactly how to tell the robot to retrieve the sample. And it turns out he chose the right sample. I don't know if all the samples were the same, but he gets the thing. He has a remote control car that he straps the sample to, and then he takes the laser and he bounces it around with some mirrors, which come dangerously close to just completely decapitating him. There's one of the great shots of the movie is the laser bouncing from behind him to in front of him, and he uses the laser to cut a hole in the wall of the laboratory because all the entryways have radiological sensors to keep people from walking out with the nuclear stuff. And then there's a great, I'm not sure what you call this shot, but they have a great shot of we're focusing on the remote control car, and it's going through this really great intricate obstacle course that somehow Paul is driving this car without being able to look at it through like a drain pipe that goes under the fence so that he can recover the car on the outside, which is it's a great shot, but you're just like, no way, that's so difficult, right?
There are so many elements to this heist. First of all, he breaks into the lab using a nail file again. He disables the security system or the cameras. He uses a frisbee to throw down past all of the motion sensors and actually set them off. But he sets them off in such a way that it seems like it's a glitch more than a real thing.
Right.
So that when by the time the guard goes to investigate, like motion sensors going off in two separate directions, he's already past them. And it seems like, it was a weird blip instead of, what it actually was. He takes one of those containers of plutonium and he makes a decoy that he fills with shampoo that just happens to be the same, like, bright green as everything else that will come into play later. The VO5 shampoo.
Some glitter and some VO5 because he went to the store or found some around the house that, happened to be a perfect match, right?
Yeah, it looks exactly like the plutonium. So he not only does he steal plutonium, but he puts this thing back into the system to, cover his tracks. Like,
he's really smart.
It's incredibly smart. He's thought, and while dodging the guards, like he's thought of every aspect of this.
Oh yeah.
Again, the more you watch him do, like it's like he's doing an Ocean's 11 all by himself with a 16th of the prep time.
With no prep time, just on the fly, right? Yeah.
Right. And he's got the car that he's like remote controlling. Like there's a guard there, and we have this dance where the car is like behind some barrels and the guard goes over behind the barrels. So he drives the car over to a crate, and we've got this back and forth as he eventually drives the car over to himself. And by that point, Jen has finally gotten her tire fixed by the other guards. And Paul even does one little thing as like an FU, like, which he shouldn't do. He puts a bunch of sugar in one of the guards' coffee cups. Serves no purpose other than that after the heist is over and they're on their way, the guard goes and takes a sip of the cup and goes, bleh.
Right. Just an extra, arrogance of like, I've done the impossible and then some. And of course, like I picked up on the fact that he secures the nuclear material, which does he have I think he has some like rubber gloves at least, but he secures it to the vehicle with like one piece of tape, just one piece of tape. They have a roll of this tape that has like nuclear material written on it. But one piece of tape is gonna not too, but so that's probably the most arrogant thing that he did in this whole thing, Doug.
Yeah, and this is like a quarter of the movie's runtime.
And it's
too.
raining too. So
Yeah. No, we zipped through
somehow the
this.
tape.
I can't play clips of it. It's it's entirely visual for the most part. It's a fantastic heist, and it's really engaging to watch because you're kind of usually with a heist you get a lot of the prep time. Like think again the classic, right? Ocean's 11. It's mostly prep. The heist is kind of a little bit at the end, and usually there's like a big misdirect on the audience that they kind of flip on you for fun, right? This is different. We didn't see any of the prep. There was no prep. You just have to kind of follow along and realize, like, if you're smart, you can kind of hang one or two steps ahead or behind of Paul as you watch it, and you realize, like, geez, he must be so observant to think of all of this stuff to be able to pull this off single-handedly, basically with Jen only doing some minor.
He's a genius.
Distraction. Yeah.
He's the smartest character in all of cinema, but it's still plausible. It is so close to like implausible or impossible, but still somehow like plausible that he does all this stuff because it's not magic, and it's not like he's an X-Men or anything. It's just like, yeah, he has a photographic memory and he's worked it all out, and he knows where all the stuff is, and yeah.
Yeah. And again, he already has his next move. He has his next move planned.
Right.
Because he pops out of the trunk to talk to Jen, and she's excited that she's going to get to write her story about this secret government lab, working under everyone's nose in Ithaca. And Paul has a different idea. He says, I'm going to you want a story? Write one about the kid who built the atomic bomb. And at first she's skeptical, but this is like full, like Victor Frankenstein shit of like, I'm going to do it because I can, not any thought about the consequences.
And he says you are sick, right? Which is probably as dark as this movie gets, is like, you're crazy. And she goes, yeah, you're sick, like that you're going to do this. But then, she eventually acquiesces and said, well, I guess you got to do it. Right.
Yeah, she doesn't, for all of her, skepticism, she doesn't push back against him too hard. Not that it's hard to. I mean, he's so, forceful. So the next scene is he tells his teacher, hey, will you sign my permission slip so I can go to this science fair? And, I've got this experiment about hamsters or some shit. He's got a fake experiment made up.
Right. I'm going to raise some hamsters in the dark. That gives him the cover to rent a closet or a room, in the school somewhere. And then this is where we begin the montage, right? Of him working everything out and assembling stuff.
Yeah, another thing I can't play too many clips of. This is a montage set to classical music. And it's like soccer for part of it, and then research as he's just reading books on nuclear physics. And he realizes he needs a design for like the housing of this thing. The soccer ball gives him the idea for the shape of it, and like that tessellated pentagonal shape all over it. That's how it's going to be. We get cuts in here of Mathewson working on the plutonium. We find out it's 99.98% pure.
Right.
And after he's kind of made these breakthroughs, he goes to buy some C4 from his buddy.
Right. This could be actually the most implausible part of the movie, is that some guy in the army to make $60 is going to sell a kid C4. And he's like, have fun, don't blow some stuff up. So this is that. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff in this movie, but that's probably the nuttiest part of like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna sell a kid some C4 here for $60 of all things. It should be like 600 or at least, right?
Yes, the same cost in 1986 as a copy of Duck Hunt.
Right.
The other thing though is I got the impression from the way they interacted that they knew each other from maybe before this guy was in the military. Because that's the vibe I got, that like, this is someone he knew who then went into the military. So yeah. A guy you used to know in high school. Like, yeah, that he noted him a solid. Like, I helped you pass high school, so you could get into the army, right?
Well,
Right.
I really like the part of the montage. I think they have a he's trying to figure out how to compress the plutonium ball. If you know anything about how that works, you've got to compress it from all sides at the same time. So you have to use shape charge explosive, which is C4, which is what I'm used a similar they used a similar method in the original Little Boy bomb, right? Or is it the Fat Man bomb? So he's trying to figure out how do I make a sphere of shape charged plastic explosive? Like how do I construct that? So there's a part where he's like cutting up a melon in the kitchen, and then he has to like sweep it all under the counter because the parents are coming in, and then of course he's playing soccer a lot, and then there's like this eureka moment of like he's looking at the soccer ball and he's like, oh, a soccer ball is a sphere constructed of flat, parts. And then he punts the soccer ball away. It floats into the air. We got a great shot of the soccer ball floating off into the sky. And so it really does culminate the whole montage really nicely artistically. And then he goes to the CAD shop, and some other nerdy guy is helping him, make the template so to construct this sphere.
Yeah, they've got some like early CG, like modeling of the sphere on a computer screen, and that they print it out. And then he tests it, right? He makes like a half dome of it out of the C4 and tests that, and it worked.
Right. And they blow it up in the field and nothing happens. It blows up and no one is concerned.
Nope. But one thing that happens in the middle of this is we see the folks at the lab have discovered the decoy, because they've been running these spectroscopic analyses on their various samples, and this one came back with 0 plutonium.
Right. Yeah. How did that happen? And they initially think, oh, this is a prank, because pranks like this happened in the real Manhattan Project or around that time. And Lithgow doesn't want to report it because that's going to get him in trouble. And so there's a kind of argument with him and some of the other people that work at the lab about, no, we got to report it. And he's like, no, this will blow over. Somebody, it's just, but it's a little serious with that. And if someone did switch it out, where is the sample? Because it's not like you want to leave this stuff in a closet or a filing cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, Mathewson tries at first, like, well, maybe it's a computer glitch or whatever, and someone says, no, someone used your key card to access the lab in the middle of the night, and so this is way beyond an oopsie kind of a glitch. Like, someone used your card to access the lab, plutonium is missing, we can't be fucking around. Like, this is something serious is going on. But what's nice is that we get a sense of like Mathewson is just as smart as Paul is, but he's farther along in his career. So I like that he figures it out fairly quickly as to what's happened. So Paul at this point has built the device. He's figured it out. It's all there, and Jen's documenting it. Mom gets a call from Mathewson, and he wants to talk to Paul, and she says, "Oh, well, he's away in New York." And he asks what hotel he's at. But like, again, without really laying it out there, you can already tell by the point of this phone call that Mathewson knows Paul did something to steal the plutonium.
Yeah.
We're in a way that shocked me when at some point I hit pause on the movie and I was like, oh, we're only halfway through and he's already figured this out. Like what happens next? How do you feel another hour after he gets caught, discovered? So, like they're really moving through this.
Yeah, once this movie gets going, it's on a train. It does no stops.
Yeah, because the team then finds this like lab where Paul was working, and like they're in there with Geiger counters and shit. Like it's all there. Like, yep, he had the plutonium here.
Yeah.
They find the canister.
Yeah, they got something to track. They can track the radiation. So Paul has gone to the science fair. And this is where we get a great menagerie of nerds who have all entered into this national science fair. And we have a special group that has like a listening device.
It's like a directional microphone.
Right, a direct microphone, and this seems like a sort of homage to the Gene Hackman movie, The Conversation. And so they of course they see Jen as the only girl in this whole vicinity, and they're like, oh, this guy is not only like smart, he's got a hot girlfriend, and so they're trying to listen to what they're saying, and yeah, the what happens is next is like keeps the audience guessing, but allows Paul to escape the government goons.
Yeah, I mean, because what the nerds overhear between Paul and Jen is non-specific. Like it's not like, oh man, we got to do something about our nuclear bomb. Like they don't mention that at all. So it's not clear that they've learned anything of value yet. But there is this moment because Roland is also at the science fair, and there's an interaction between him and Paul and Jen. If you look at the board that is Roland's invention or science fair thing, it's the fucking internet in 1986. It's this whole thing about like computers
Really?
connected to each other and sharing information
Oh
across
my
the
God.
world. And I'm like, whoa, in a way that was like, it's very shocking.
I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, go back and freeze frame it, and you'll realize like the like somebody in the fucking props department on this movie invented the internet in 1986. Now, granted, there was like DARPANet and other things that existed
Right.
then, but it's like laid out there perfectly.
Nice.
So yeah, that really floored me. But anyway, so Jen, sorry, so the nerds confront Jen and Paul, and they want to know, what they're up to. And they discuss all of their projects that they're working on, all of which are pretty weird, to varying degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, we get this scene of Mathewson. He gets off a helicopter and he's talking with Colonel Fraser's dad and other brass. Kind
Fisher
of talking,
Granddad, yes, Colonel.
Colonel Fraser, Martin Crane.
Right.
And they're on their way to the fair too, but they're kind of talking about like the potential impact of what this is, how they're going to deal with it. And meanwhile, we get Jen they're in the hotel room, Jen and Paul, and she's reading off her like proposed press release about them being in the nuclear club. He's going to be the only private citizen to have made their own nuclear bomb here, along with, nation states such as the USSR and the United States and Israel and a few others.
Right.
And she says, do I get a jacket? And she says, you get anything you want. And it's makeout time. She's turned on by this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Mathewson and the brass invade.
Right. Yeah, the government goons came in, and Jen says, my dad's a lawyer. Don't touch me. And at some point there's some negotiation in there. They don't have the bomb with them, and I think they inject Paul with some truth serum. So that's always a great trope in any movie, is someone,
Yeah.
Doped up on truth serum. And then I think they searched the car and the bomb's not there. Have they announced that at some point?
Yeah. We've gotten slightly out of order, but yeah, so they barge into the room, and Mathewson tries to diffuse things by saying, let me just have a talk with him, genius to genius, basically, because he'll listen
Right.
to me, because guns are being pointed, like, the military guys are ready to basically kill Paul.
Right.
He's like, let me talk to him. So they have me, and while the nerds are listening in, but they have this walk and talk, and Mathewson basically says, look, they'll lock you in a room and throw away the room,
Right.
like
Great line.
just give him the fucking bomb. And this is where it's like, for all of Paul's smarts, he's still a kid, because he's like, but I want to compete in the science fair. And it's like, we're past that.
Right, yeah.
You've got to realize like the gravity of what you've done.
Yeah.
You could start a war, he says, which is what gets him to relent.
Which is kind of interesting line, because like really blowing up and killing everyone in New York City is probably like a worse it would be my go-to.
Yeah, at some point, I forget where it is, but we've layered in that the bomb is not fully connected. Like there is, at present, it has zero chance of going off.
Right. It hasn't been armed. Yeah.
It's not armed, and not all of the components are connected to each other that
Right.
need to be for it to be active. So there is no danger of an accidental Hiroshima. But he
Right.
that's when he says, all right, it's in our car. And they go down to the car and they open the trunk and it's not in there. And Paul sincerely says, I have no idea where it is now. And so the military brass don't want to hear that. That's when they take him away. They hit him with the sodium pentothal and interrogate him. But the nerds bust him out by basically flipping a whole bunch of electrical switches to create distractions that allows
Shut off
him
the power.
to, yeah, and fire
And they get
extinguishers.
the fire extinguishers to blast them, and then that's how they escape the government goons. And it's like, with the power of nerds, saves the day. And doesn't he ask them why are you doing this? And I forget what their answer is, but it's again it's like us kids against the adults and stuff, right?
Yeah, power to the people, all that. Fuck the system. And so they give them Paul and Jen some cash, but Paul's still pretty drugged up. But that gives them a chance to get away. They hop a cab. He says, "I love you, Jenny. I want to be your wife." He's still out of it. But the cab driver tells him, if you want to get to Ithaca, take a bus. So they leave the cab and they get on a bus to head back to Ithaca. So a chopper later that night arrives at Paul's house. Mom is very confused, but the van pulls up and goons and the military brass get out along with Mathewson. And now Paul's house is some kind of a op center.
Right. And there's a lot of there's a brick phone. Somebody has one of the 80s brick phones in there. I think when they're on the bus, we see they're watching a news report on somebody's portable TV. And it's one of those things that existed in the 80s, but nobody had one. And someone riding the bus could not afford one of these things. in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. It is a chance for them, though, to hear that Paul's being called a terrorist on the news.
Right.
So he's, his face is plastered all over TV. And so he's
right. So he knows he can't go home. So they hatch a plan. They're going to go to the lab, back to the lab, so they can out the laboratory to the world, get the news in. They start a phone tree. Jen calls up a few people, including Robert Sean Leonard. And he gets the teenage posse going, and everybody says go to the nuclear lab, which is a really bad advice. They could get they're saying, they could get killed, this kid's got a bomb. Anyway,
yeah, we have this nice scene of Paul and Jen finding this farmhouse to hide out in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is their kind of romantic scene where he says, I'll give it back tomorrow. He will give back the bomb. And there's this discussion about well, we shouldn't give up now that we've got them. And it's you don't have them. They have you. You're on the run from the law. You're a teenager with no money, and you broke into a government facility. You stole plutonium and made a nuclear bomb. You've committed an untold number of crimes.
Right.
This is serious shit. You do not have the upper hand in any way. But he says, you always have a future. And they share an apple and they snuggle and fall asleep.
Right. And then they find an old truck, get it running, and they're headed to the lab, right?
Well, we get this interesting scene between Mathewson and Mom here where, she's like, you don't know him. She's very defensive about her son, despite all of the, indisputable evidence of, again, the incredible list of crimes he has committed. But she's like, oh, well, he has a gift and he wants to use it. And it's well, yeah, but he used it to make a nuclear bomb.
Right.
Yeah. Cure cancer. But she says, if anything happens to my son, I will make everyone absolutely miserable, which again, this seriously must motivate Mathewson as to how horny he is for this woman.
Of course. And it's just classic mom stuff, They're always got to be protective of her only boy, who is obviously the golden child here. So, he's a big fan.
Yeah, granted, I don't know what I would do if I found out that my kid had created a nuclear bomb. I want to say I'd be, supportive and I would love them, but they got to be stopped. They can't let them blow anybody up. I mean, that's terrible.
You'd be impressed. You'd be like, that's part of me.
Yeah, it's
Chip off, go for it.
impressive. Yeah. All right. So as you said, they steal a truck, probably with a nail file again.
Right.
And the phone rings at Paul's house, and it's being recorded and traced. It's a collect call from Paul, and both Mom and Mathewson are on the phone here, and he's like, "Did you build a bomb?" He's like, "Well, only a little one." And he says he'll turn it in exchange for a statement from Mathewson about the truth about what's going on in the lab, and even though he knows he can't agree to that, he says it anyway because this is like, just tell him what he wants to hear so we can get this done. Sure. Paul says meet him at the lab, and so they go. And what's funny, we get this scene between Mathewson and Fraser's dad, and he's like, "Well, I heard him admit he was a terrorist." It's like, clearly he was. This is like the my cousin Vinny thing. I shot the clerk. See, he said he shot the clerk.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a terrorist. Like, the kid said he was a terrorist.
Yep. Yeah, Fraser's dad is real dense in this.
They don't recognize sarcasm.
No. He tends to make the wrong turn or wrong call at almost every turn.
Well, that's his role in this story.
There's always someone in a movie that has to be a reverse barometer, right? Like their role is like whatever the right call is, they're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
It's the Dennis Franz in Die Hard 2 is like that character. All right. So the kids stop the truck and they have a plan. Jen is going to go somewhere and make a phone call. We don't know exactly what she's going to do, but she's going to be off doing her own thing while the climax of the movie happens, basically. And so Paul walks up to the lab. He's got the thing in just under his arm, like, I've got my nuclear bomb.
In a wooden box.
In a wooden box, just strolls into the lab now, unimpeded. I mean, there's guards everywhere with guns, kind of like, probably ready to shoot him at a moment's notice, but they allow him to walk unfettered into the lab.
Right. There's a sniper in the woods. He's got the biggest telescopic scope you've ever seen. And he says, just give me a shot behind the ear. I'll turn him off like a switch. And I think in real life, they would have been like, okay. And that would have been seemingly like the most plausible and efficient way that the story would probably end in real life.
Yeah. The only thing probably keeping them from shooting him is either one, he is a kid, or two, they're afraid that if they shot him and he fell to the ground, the bomb would go off.
Right. The bomb might be armed. Like, they don't know the status of the bomb. Like, yeah. But there's always a chance. And in the movie logic of like, he's a kid, or they might set off the bomb by shooting him, or they might, miss, So that's the plot armor in this situation, I think.
Well, Mathewson meets him at the gate, right? And Paul says, "Let me see the statement you wrote." And he reads it, and he's like, "All right." And he says, Mathewson's like, "You really want to go inside the building?" And he's like, "That's what makes it so exciting. It's the not knowing what's going to happen next." And Mathewson says, "Give me the box." And he says, I can't do that. If I hand you the box, they'll murder me." And he's not entirely wrong. That is a real possibility.
He's lucky they haven't murdered him already. But yeah, this is where like Paul seems to get, he's obviously under a lot of stress, and he seems to be a little unhinged, and his judgment is impaired. And he doesn't, at this point in the movie, like, it's the first time where he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's out of his element. And he's just, and again, we've seen him, like, he's robs the place on the fly, but that's how he's used to doing things, and just, on the fly. And in this situation, like, the way it's portrayed is like he's on shaky ground here. He doesn't know what the play is. He's just moving, trying to move forward to see like what happens, right? I'm not sure what his in game is, right?
Yeah, and I think just like with the heist, like you're just a step or two behind him. He's working something. He's a smart kid, and maybe you as the audience, like, I'm not quite smart enough to figure out what he's planning on doing to get through this. So it's kind of fun because you have to assume he has thought about this and that this is in theory going the way he wants it to go, but not necessarily, right? Like, he is he's kind of at the end of that rope in terms of how smart he is. So,
well, on the one hand, we don't know exactly if this bomb is good enough to, go fission, but it could still be a dirty bomb. And taking a dirty bomb into a nuclear laboratory is probably the worst place to go, because even if it was just a regular conventional bomb and it's blowing up, there's all this nuclear material around. That's going to be quite a cleanup operation. So that would be the last place that they would let him into with that device.
Right. Well, we cut away from this for a minute. We see Jen makes this phone call to Max, this character Max, and says, go call your parents and start a chain of phone calls telling everybody to come to the lab.
Hello?
Max, thank God.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Jesus, what's going on? You guys have been on the news, and someone said there was a helicopter at Paul's house.
Listen, Max, you got to do 2 things for us, okay? It's a matter of life and death.
Yeah, sure. Whose?
Everybody's. First, call my parents, and then call 2 people. I don't care who. And have them call 2 people. And call the newspaper and the TV station. Are you listening?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, there's a place called Metatomics Company out on Route 81.
That's what we used to do in the 80s, Doug. Like, we didn't have the internet. So, you call 2 people and they call 2 people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they go through the lab. The box is x-rayed, and it confirms that the bomb is in there and it is not armed. And that's when the guard figures, well, now I can shoot him because there's no danger of the bomb going off. And in the split second it takes for both Mathewson and Paul to recognize that's what's about to happen, Mathewson comes to his assistance and kind of basically shoves the guard so that his gun is pointed upwards. That gives Paul the chance to grab the bomb and sprint. So Mathewson is basically committed some pretty significant crime in the name of saving the life of this kid who he respects on some level because of his acumen.
He's obstructing justice. And I think the guy says, do that again and I'll splatter your brains on the wall or something like that, right? And so Paul goes and hides in the lab. And so now it's a little more difficult to shoot him. And they, of course, don't want to accidentally. Now they're even in more danger of shooting something that doesn't react well with bullets.
Yeah. Well, while that's happening, though, Paul starts assembling the bomb to arm it. And Colonel Fraser's dad gives Mathewson a talking to and says, get in there. And he says, I'm not a killer. And Colonel Fraser's dad said, yes, you are. What do you think you're manufacturing all day? What do you think this is for? And I'm like, that was very canny to have that, because we've seen a lot of things with him before about him, kind of like Paul, he's so into the science. He's not thinking about what is it actually for? What's the point of doing all this?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, but Colonel Fraser's dad wants Mathewson to go in there and talk to Paul because he's the only person Paul has a chance of listening to.
Right.
And so we get this really cool scene between them where they kind of, they have it out about
they have a heart to heart.
Yeah.
What do you really want to happen here? And let's think this through. What's the best case? And then Matheson gets Paul to agree, to give him the bomb. I'll get you out of here, kid. Even though we know that even if they let him go, they can track him down at any point in time and throw him in that room. And then Matheson then threatens to, in this kind of speech, to turn the key and blow. He's like, I'll make a bet with you. I can turn this key before you can shoot me in the head, or turn it after you shoot me, or something like that. Just let this kid go. And then in this very intense standoff, the bomb arms.
Hold it, gentlemen. Fellow sons of bitches. We're all what we are, right? So here's my responsible act. I'm taking him out of here. And since you all like scenarios so much, I've got one for you. It's called a little game of chance. I'll bet you that I can turn this key and blow us all to hell even after you shoot me. And you're gonna have to shoot me, okay? Everybody's problems all solved in 1/1,000,000th of a second. Now, who wants to play?
Something happens to the bomb to where the timer starts, even though he hasn't turned the key. And then it's like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. We're all gonna die, or New York is gonna get blown up unless we can defuse this bomb. And in this case, yeah, that's like all sort of grievances are put aside because the only people that can defuse this bomb are Paul and Matheson. And so then we get into this great bomb diffusing scene that's very tense, and it's handled very well. And there's a lot of great sciencey stuff because Matheson has to explain, well, this happened in Alamogordo, like the circuits in the clock are affected by radiation. So he knows more, obviously a lot more about building a nuclear bomb than Paul does. And this is like a Radio Shack hardware store nuclear bomb. So the components are not the highest quality, let's say. And so, yeah, the radiation has affected the circuits. And so that has caused this thing to count down. And it counts down from some crazy number like 99,000 hours or something. It starts from like 99999, right? And so the army guy, or Fraser's dad, is like, oh, we got plenty of time to defuse this. And then Matheson says, no, it's an exponential decay. We get some good math jargon in here. It's actually increasing the amount that it's counting down. And then, of course, he's able to do all the complex math in his head. And he says, actually, we got about, like 9 minutes or something like that. 5 minutes? Yeah. I forget what he says. 4 minutes, something. Anyway, so a really good workable amount of time for the climax of this movie. And so then they go about trying to defuse the bomb, and they've got it down on the workstation, and Paul's sitting there. And probably the funniest line of the movie, or the funniest scene in the movie, is Paul goes, does anyone have a screwdriver? And about 8 arms reach into the frame of the scene with screwdrivers, and he's pointing at the different screwdrivers and like, which one do I need? Oh, this one. And he grabs one of the screwdrivers that the 8 arms that have been inserted into the frame have provided, which I think is just such a genius move, because like anything at this point, anything the kid asks for, people are just going to immediately give it to him. And so he tries to unscrew the bomb. It's, again, fused. And I think Matheson says, oh, yeah, the same thing happened at, Alamogordo, in that. And he's like giving a little history lesson. Of course, Fraser Dad's like, come on, let's focus here. Or says something like that. Like, that's very fascinating, doctor, but let's defuse the bomb. And then, yeah, it's counting down. We get a really good view of the bomb. He's used salad bowls for the focusers. There's Duracell batteries, but taking those out won't work. Like the capacitor, he's used photostrobes, which are like camera flashes, and they've already been charged. We hear that charge going off at like the noise. So yeah, disconnecting that won't work. And so finally, they go through a few things of like, okay, we can do this. They say, okay, we've got to cut the main leads to the explosives. So essentially there's a wire going to every shaped charge that is surrounding going from the photostrobes to the detonators. And so we've got to cut all of these wires simultaneously. And so everybody got a pair of pliers. And so everybody pulls out their pair of pliers. And then Paul goes, I don't have a cutter. And then probably this is the funniest line in the movie. Fraser's dad says, "You mean I'm gonna die because some asshole didn't bring a pair of pliers?" And yeah, great. Uh, Paul comes up. He's got his nail. He doesn't pull out his nail file. He pulls out his fingernail clippers. He's like, I think this will work. And then we've got everybody. This is so perfect because normally a movie would go, okay, on three, three, two, one, and then Matheson's like, no, this is just practice. Because some guy goes, are we going on? Is it 3, 2, 1 cut or just cut on one or like what? Because we. That's always the contentious part in the movie. I believe in Top Gun, just in Top Gun, Maverick goes break on 3, and then he goes 3, 2, 1, and you're just like, wait. So we get that straight. We go, everyone's gonna go. We're gonna go 3, 2, 1 cut. That's just the practice, and then they cut on one, or they cut on cut, and the timer stops, and this is a very easy to miss Easter egg. So the timer stops on the numbers 7/16/45 or 7/16/1945, something like that. Anyway, so that is the day that the first nuclear bomb or explosion went off was 7/16/1945. So I've seen the movie many times. This is part of my internet research. That you wouldn't like recognize that because it's like a super intense movie. It's only on screen for a very short amount of time. You're like, oh wow, they defused the bomb. You're not looking at the number. And most times when the bomb is counting down, it stops on 1, right? Or 2 or something like that. So yeah, a very brainy Easter egg that I think most people would miss. But that is how the bomb diffusing scene ends. It's got 2 really funny moments in there, and then we have to wrap up the movie.
Right. There's another moment in there I love. In the midst of this, where at one point they talk about why don't we just take it in, drop it in a quarry nearby, and it can blow up there. And John Lithgow has to be like, you don't know what you stole because this shit is so pure. The reaction you're going to get is way more intense than what you planned on, which is another reason why the timer is counting down faster and faster. Is again, this is the good shit, plutonium. It's not working the way you expect.
Right. At one point, one of the underlings, it says, shouldn't we, or Colonel, shouldn't we think about evacuating? And he's like, what do you mean, evacuate New York? Right. And I think Paul goes, what?
Yeah, the explosion's so big.
Right. It's the blue meth of plutonium.
Yeah, there's also they do a great job throughout this of kind of letting the audience in on enough of the science to kind of go like, oh yeah, that would be bad. Where he's like, yeah, the strobe lights are already charged up. So even if we pull off the batteries, they could still fire and set off the bomb. So that's not going to work. Really, really great stuff through all that. But as you said, it worked. Everyone takes a breath and they can start dismantling it immediately. And they go, who wants some fresh air?
Yeah. Then we've got the scene. All the townspeople show up. The Dr. Matheson opens the doors and there's like some sort of line about the general saying like, we've got to keep this under wraps and Matheson's like, you're gonna kill us all? You're gonna kill all of them? Like, it's over, General. Like, they know, as if that somehow makes the world a better place. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little like we get it. You got to manufacture the plutonium somewhere. Like, it's not that big a deal ultimately as to what they're doing. Like,
right? They're just gonna set up another lab somewhere else.
Yeah, whatever. It's just a factory that makes plutonium. Like in terms of like secret government laboratories and things that could be happening in them, there could be way worse than this. Like you said,
right?
Like a Stranger Things, right? You could have all kinds of weird stuff,
right? Genetic experiment, and yeah,
right. But and then like the brass are just like humph, and then they all leave. And this is the most unrealistic part of the movie, which is like, no, Paul, you're still going to jail for what you did.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So what's really been accomplished here. Yeah, so that's kind of where it ends, right? And we know, we don't. Uh, does the mom show up at the end, or is it just kind of Paul and
Yeah, mom's there, Jen's there. There's
yeah,
hugs.
everybody's there. It's a big happy party. Yeah, and Ithaca, New York, is one of the most beautiful places that I've seen in a movie. I mean, it's just this idyllic. Everything is green and you know, classic college town.
Yeah, and that's it, right? That's the end of the movie. We have all these hugs from everybody, and
Right.
you know, it's an interesting interchange at the very end. He says, "I," Paul says, "I did something," and mom asks, well, "What happened?" And he says, "Everything." Now let's get out of here. Like weirdly vague,
Right.
not telling mom, "Oh, what do you mean you did something? What did you do? Look at all this commotion you caused." He didn't say, "Well, okay, mom, I made a nuclear bomb from spare parts, and out of
Right.
plutonium I stole the other night."
Right. So we sort of like sidestep all the repercussions of everything, and we were almost mom. I almost killed everyone in New York and Pennsylvania. Right? Am I grounded?
Yeah. But I mean, look, it's one of those things where like it's an '80s movie. We got to just get to a happy ending. We don't have to do the like. You could have done the like ending bit where you see each of the characters in a little text box. Jen did grow up to become a journalist for the Washington Post or whatever. Like they didn't do that.
Right. I spend the rest of her life trying to free Paul from the government.
From the black site that he's never getting out of.
Right, right. Well, I suppose, okay, so I suppose in at least movie land, the government's like, this kid's really smart. We could use him. So, kind of a catch me if you can type thing. It's like, well, Matheson, if you promise to keep your eye on Paul, we'll relocate you. He as long as he works and builds nuclear weapons, we won't throw you in jail forever and work out some sort of deal like that. Maybe, right?
Yeah, you can get paid to
That's
work on
really
this
the
kind
best
of
thing you
stuff
could hope
for a regular job. Yeah, you could do that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the saving grace for him is the idea of like you're so smart that we can't, just lock you away and throw away the key. Like you do have a future. Like anyone who has this level of scientific, skill should be put to the betterment of mankind in some way.
Right. Or we could use you to, once the Soviet Union collapses, like we could send you over and you dismantle their bombs. Like you're pretty good at this dismantling bomb stuff, right? Yeah. So he's a very valuable resource that needs to be utilized. Yeah, they just need to make sure they can control him. It's like, well, we know where your mother lives, so.
Well,
And
that's
that
the end
could
of
set up the sequel, right?
yeah, that's the sequel. But yeah, that's the end of the Manhattan Project. I'm really glad you brought this to me because this was so much fun, and I'm so glad. Like I didn't know it existed, and so I hope our audience goes and checks this out. Because, like I said, if you've seen kind of all of the '80s stuff like this, and you're like, I wish there was more of it. This probably passed you by. So so thanks for bringing it.
It's a hidden gem.
Definitely a hidden gem. Yeah, so I'll throw it to you, BT. What do you think it is that like? It's hard to say this movie endures in that it was, it wasn't a huge hit at the time. And, even as hidden gems go, that remains fairly hidden, but it's obviously still special to you. So what is it you think about this movie that makes it worth a second look?
It just has a very unique vibe to it. And there's a certain kind of music to, the way they use music in there to keep it lighthearted, even though this is like the worst thing anybody has ever, ever done, a high school student has ever done. And we have a lot of like good, funny moments in it. I think John Lithgow nails the performance. Like if I'll turn it to you. If anybody in this movie deserves an Oscar, I'd give it to Lithgow.
Yeah.
Maybe the director, one of those. Do you and what do you think? I think the movie is really cool because a lot of stuff in the movie has not aged well, but yet a lot of stuff in the movie has aged well. So what do you think has aged well in this movie versus what has not aged well in this movie?
Well, the horniness is a little awkward in places, but I think by and large this movie is aged very well. I think the heist sequence alone is really well put together. The bomb diffusing sequence at the climax is really well put together. So like those two set pieces alone, I think are really great in terms of giving this movie the kind of event feeling you want of like, when am I going to be, just plowing through my popcorn? It's those moments, and they're so well put together that like, I think that really makes it work. And the movie does a good job of keeping you on your toes because it's like, you keep thinking like, well, where is this going? Like, he doesn't want to kill anyone with this bomb. Is it going to be, a thing where he's on the run, which of course eventually turns into, how is this going to all actually work out? It's a very well put together script from, again, a person who, like I said, worked on some very, very good scripts before this.
Yeah, it's a very good structure. It has the three really good parts. We have the breaking into the laboratory sequence. We have the making the bomb montage, and then we have the defusing the bomb montage, and then or scene, which is done really well. And then of course the Nerd Emporium Science Fair has a lot of great tropes in it, and as you said, the guy invented the internet in there. Like there's a lot of little great little Easter eggs and nuggets along the way, and a lot of stuff has encapsulates a lot of the 80s. This movie is dripping with 80s-ness of that decade, and the brick phone and the portable black and white TV and stuff like that. So, and the phone tree. And another Easter egg that you might have missed, very beginning of the movie, the sequence when the trucks are driving down the street, there is a DeLorean parked right across from Paul's house.
Oh, nice. I didn't catch that. That's solid. All right. So I'm like I said, we're kind of at the end here. I'm really glad we did this. So thanks for bringing this to the podcast. I never would have thought to do this. And I'm really glad to I would watch this movie again anytime. This is a lot of fun. So BT, anything to plug before we wrap things up?
Only that I am very happy to do anyone's podcast where we talk about movies and sci-fi and nerdy stuff and nuclear weapons and all that jazz.
If you need someone for your podcast, hit me up. I'll put you in touch with BT. I'm very glad you brought this to join your other catalog of, like I said, nuclear bomb related topics. So as for me, some admin stuff, if you like the show, of course, drop a review on any podcast that you listen to and enjoy. That really does a lot to help the podcast find new audience, as does word of mouth. Tell a friend, post about it on social media. All of that's very appreciated. If you want to get in touch with us, go to our social media portals. Those are all in the show notes. In particular, I would recommend Facebook, Instagram, and BlueSky because I post a clue every Wednesday about what the next episode is going to be. That's how you find out what's coming up next. So play along. I am not just the host of this show, but I'm also involved with two other podcasts. I have Playing by Ear, which is a music show that I do every other week with my wife and brother-in-law, where we take one of us brings in an album and we break it down track by track. So if you're into music, that's a fun show to enjoy. And then if you go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod, you can drop a few bucks and listen to me once a month. Join my friend Josh Koval from the Still Loading podcast. We do a podcast together called Still Muppeting, which is we take a different Jim Henson thing every month and work our way through that. So we're working our way through a catalog of Jim Henson-y things. So that'll do it for this episode. BT, thanks again for coming by. This is a blast, literally.
Thanks for having me, Doug. I'm really happy that you enjoyed this movie.
Me too. All right, so until next time, that is one more entry in the Nostalgium Arcanum.
MacGruber, making life-saving inventions out of household material. MacGruber, getting in and out of ultra-sticky situations. MacGruber, the guy's a friggin' genius. MacGruber!
Damn it, we're trapped!
That bomb is set to detonate in 20 seconds. What do we do, MacGruber?
Everybody stay calm. We're gonna make it out of here. Just do exactly as I say. Casey, hand me that paperclip.
You got it.
Jojo, grab that twine.
I'm on it.
Casey, gum wrapper.
Right here.
Jojo, that dog turd.
What?
The dog turd right by your foot.
I'm picking up that dog turd.
10 seconds.
You heard her, Jojo. Give me the dog turd.
No, why do we need a dog turd?
That's my business. Now pick up the dog turd.
Just give him the dog turd.
You give the dog turd.
Yeah, Casey, give me the dog turd.
No, I can't. I'm keeping count. 3 seconds.
Fine, I'll get the dog turd. I just hope I have enough time to...
MacGruber!